She caught my arm on the steps of the register office and said, "Marry me before noon," and I nearly told her she'd lost her mind, because I was the man who'd called off our wedding 3 years ago and broken her heart doing it. Then I saw the white dress folded over her arm and the time on the clock above the door, and I understood she wasn't asking me to fix us. She was marrying someone else at 12, and she was giving me until then to tell her I'd been wrong. Let me go back to the start of that morning, because a moment like that doesn't mean anything until you understand what I did 3 years ago, and why I'd spent every day since being the kind of man who deserved to be standing on those steps. I'm Adam Cole. I'm 39. A structural engineer. I work out whether buildings will stand up, whether a beam will hold the weight you're about to put on it, whether the thing you've designed will still be standing in 100 years or come down in 20. It's precise work, and it suits me, because I've always trusted numbers more than I trust myself. A load-bearing calculation doesn't lie. It doesn't get scared and do the wrong thing and dress it up as the right one. People do that. I did that, once, to the only person I ever loved, and I've spent 3 years living inside the consequences. I live in a town in the north of England, the kind of place where the register office is a solid Victorian building on the main square with a clock above the door that's been keeping the town's time for 150 years. I walked past it that morning because it was on my way to a site meeting, a numb man on an ordinary errand, 3 years past the worst thing I ever did. I wasn't looking for her. I'd made a full-time occupation out of not looking for her. And then a hand closed around my arm, and I turned, and it was Claire. I have to tell you about Claire, because you can't understand the steps of that register office until you understand what I threw away on them, in a manner of speaking, 3 years before. Claire Bennett and I met when I was 33 and she was 31, at a friend's birthday, and I have never in my life been so completely undone by a person so quickly. She was a primary school teacher. She taught 7-year-olds, and she had a way of talking about them, about the small daily heroics of a child learning to read. That made me understand she was one of those rare people who actually made the world kinder by being in it. She was warm and quick and stubborn, and she laughed with her whole body, and she had this habit, when she was happy, of going quiet and just looking at you, like she was checking you were real. We were together 2 years. We were happy in the uncomplicated way that I now understand is the rarest thing there is and that you never appreciate until it's gone. And I asked her to marry me on an ordinary Tuesday because I couldn't wait for a special occasion, and she said yes, and cried and then laughed at herself for crying, and we set a date, and I was for about 8 months the happiest and luckiest man I knew. And then, 3 weeks before our wedding, I called it off. I'm going to tell you the truth about why, but not yet, because I didn't tell Claire the truth about why, and that's the whole shape of the wound, and you need to feel it the way she felt it for 3 years before you understand what she was doing on those steps. What Claire knew, what everyone knew, what I let them all believe was that Adam Cole got cold feet 3 weeks before his wedding, sat his fiancée down, and told her he wasn't sure, that he thought they wanted different things, that he couldn't go through with it. I let her think I'd looked at the whole of our life together and found it wanting. I let her think she wasn't enough. I sat in her flat and watched her face come apart, and I said the cruelest, most necessary lie of my life, and then I walked out, and I did not tell her the real reason, and I let her believe for 3 years that the man who'd sworn he loved her had simply, in the end, not wanted her. It was the worst thing I've ever done, and I did it on purpose, and I'll get to why. She moved on the way you're supposed to. Or I heard she did the town small, news travels. I heard she'd started seeing someone, a good man, a solicitor named Tom, steady and kind, the sort who'd never in 100 years do to a woman what I'd done. And I heard a few months back that they'd got engaged, and I told myself I was glad. I even mostly was. That's the thing about the particular hell I'd built for myself. I'd broken her heart specifically so she could have a life like the one she was now going to have, and now she was going to have it, and I was supposed to be glad, and I was. And it was also the loneliest feeling I've ever known, being glad about that. So that was the man standing on the register office steps when Claire caught his arm. A man who'd done a terrible thing for a reason he'd never explained, who'd spent 3 years believing he'd done right, and who'd made a quiet, gray piece with never being forgiven, because being forgiven would have required telling the truth, and telling the truth would have undone the whole point. I turned, and it was her, and the bottom fell out of the morning. She looked beautiful and wrecked at the same time. 3 years older, and I registered every day of it, the way you do with a face you once knew better than your own. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, or was about to, or both, and she had her hand tight around my arm, and over her other arm, folded carefully, was a white dress. "Claire," I said. It came out cracked. "What, marry me before noon," she said. "Adam, marry me before noon." And I nearly said she'd lost her mind. I nearly said 100 things. And then my eyes went, the way they always went, to the load-bearing thing, to the two facts that held the whole moment up, the white dress folded over her arm, and the clock above the register office door, which said 20 past 10. And I understood all at once and horribly what I was looking at. "You're getting married today," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. That's a wedding dress. You're marrying Tom. Today, here at 12, she said, and her chin came up, and a tear went down her face, and she didn't wipe it. At 12 o'clock, in that building, I am marrying Tom Harding, who is a good man, who has never once made me feel like I wasn't enough, who is currently at his flat getting ready to marry me because he thinks I've popped out to collect the flowers. Her hand tightened on my arm. "And I have been standing across this square for 40 minutes watching for you, because I found out you'd be walking past this morning, and I have exactly 1 hour and 40 minutes before I marry someone else, and I am giving every single one of them to you." Her voice broke clean in half. "So marry me before noon, Adam, or tell me why I shouldn't marry him. But say something true, for once in your life. Because I cannot walk into that building and marry a good man while I'm still." She stopped. She couldn't finish it. "Just say something true." The square went quiet around us. Or I did. A bus went past. A pigeon lifted off the war memorial. I didn't hear any of it. "You waited for me," I said. "You knew I'd be here." "Your mother," she said. "I still see your mum, Adam. Did you know that? She never stopped speaking to me. We have coffee. She misses you. You'd know that if you ever came home." That landed somewhere deep. "She mentioned, weeks ago, that you had a site meeting on the square this morning at 10:30, because she worries about you working too much, and she tells me things because she has no one else to tell them to." And I filed it away, and I told myself it meant nothing. And then last night I couldn't sleep, because I'm getting married today, and all I could think about was that you'd be right here this morning, an hour before, and that if I let myself walk into that building without ever once making you tell me the truth, I'd spend the rest of my life not knowing. She was crying properly now, so I told Tom I'd collect the flowers, and I put my dress in the car, and I came here, and I've been standing across the square for 40 minutes, losing my nerve, and then you walked past, and I ran. I looked at the woman I'd broken on purpose 3 years ago, standing on the register office steps in the last hour and a half of being unmarried. And I understood I had been handed the one thing I never thought I'd get and never thought I deserved, a chance to tell the truth before it was too late. And I understood at the same time that telling the truth would blow up the good, safe, kind life I'd broken her heart specifically to give her. And I stood there, a man who does load-bearing calculations for a living, trying to work out whether the truth would hold the weight or bring the whole thing down. "Why did you come to me?" I said, stalling, my voice unsteady. "You're marrying a good man in an hour. Why aren't you at home putting flowers in your hair? Why are you standing on these steps with the man who, because I never got over you," she said. Just like that. Flat and furious and devastated. That's my true thing, since you won't go first. I have spent 3 years building a life over the top of you. And it's a good life, and Tom is a good man, and I love him, I do. Don't you dare think I don't, but it's the kind of love you choose because it's safe, because it will never ever do to you what you did to me. And this morning I stood in front of the mirror in that dress, and I could not stop thinking about you. And I hated myself for it, and I hated you more. And I realized I could not marry Tom with a clear conscience until I'd looked you in the eye one time and made you tell me the truth about why you left. Her voice cracked. Because I've never believed it, Adam, that's the thing. For 3 years everyone's told me you got cold feet, that you looked at me and decided I wasn't enough, and I've tried to believe it, and I never could. Because I was there. I saw your face for 2 years, and a man who looked at me the way you looked at me does not just decide he doesn't want me. So I need you to tell me the truth. Did you stop loving me? Because if you did, if you look me in the eye right now and tell me you stopped loving me, then I'll go home. And I'll marry Tom at 12. And I'll finally let you go. But if you didn't, she stopped. She couldn't say the rest. And here it was. The whole thing, 3 years of it, come down to a clock above a door, and a woman in tears, and a choice about whether to keep the lie that had cost us both everything, or finally set it down. The load-bearing question. And I looked at Claire Bennett, and I could not do it. I could not look her in the eye and tell her I'd stopped loving her, because it was the one lie left that I didn't have the strength for. I didn't stop loving you, I said. Her breath caught. I never stopped. Not for one single day. Claire, my own voice went. The cold feet was a lie. I've let you believe it for 3 years and it was a lie and I'm so sorry. Then why she was gripping my arm hard enough to hurt now. And I was glad of it. Why did you do it? Why did you sit in my flat and tell me you weren't sure? Why did you let me think I wasn't enough for 3 years? Why, Adam? And I told her. Standing on the steps of the register office, with an hour and a half on the clock, I finally told her the thing I should have told her 3 years before. 3 weeks before the wedding, I said, my father was arrested. She went still. You didn't know, because I made sure nobody knew, because I was so ashamed I could barely breathe. My dad, you knew him as this quiet, decent man, and he was, mostly, and he also spent 15 years running a business that turned out to be built on fraud. He'd been taking money from investors, people who trusted him, friends, family friends for years, moving it around, robbing one to pay the next. And 3 weeks before our wedding, it all came down. The police came. And when they came, Claire, they didn't just come for him. They came for everything connected to him. Everything with his name on it. And my name was on some of it, because I was his son and he'd used me the way he'd used everyone. Put my name on things I didn't understand I was signing. And for a while, for a genuinely terrifying, while it looked like I might be liable for a portion of it. Hundreds of thousands of pounds. Debts and legal fees and years of it. Years of courts and investigators and having your life turned inside out and your name in the paper as the son of the man who stole from his own friends. The clock said 10:30. I kept going, because now that it was out I couldn't stop it. And we were 3 weeks from getting married. And I sat up one night, and I did the thing I do, Claire. I did the calculation. I looked at you, this woman with a spotless life. A good name, a job she loved teaching people's children. A family who trusted me, and I looked at what was about to land on me. The debt, and the shame, and the years of it. And I thought, if I marry her, all of this becomes hers too. Her name, tangled up in my father's fraud. Her savings, at risk if the liability came to me. Her reputation in this small town, forever the woman who married into that family. Years of her life spent in courtrooms and solicitors' offices paying for a crime she had nothing to do with. All because she loved me. My voice broke completely. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't drag you into the wreckage. So I made the calculation, and the calculation said the kindest thing I could do was get you out cleanly, completely, before the wedding tied your life to mine. And I knew you wouldn't leave. That was the problem. If I told you the truth, you'd have stayed. You'd have said we'll face it together. Because that's who you are. And you'd have married me anyway and spent the next 5 years paying for my father's sins. So I didn't give you the choice. I told you I didn't want you. Because I don't want you was the only thing I could say that would make you leave. And leaving was the only thing that would keep you safe. Story Oak 71B. Claire was crying, both hands over her mouth now, and I made myself finish it. I broke your heart on purpose, Claire. I let you believe you weren't enough because the truth that you were everything, and I was trying to save you, would have made you stay and ruined your life. And I've hated myself every day for 3 years. And I've also thought, every day, that I did the right thing. Both, at the same time. That's been my whole life since I left you. Being sure I saved you and being sure I destroyed us. In the same breath every single day. The square was quiet. The clock ticked. Somewhere across the square, in an hour, a good man named Tom was getting dressed to marry her. "How did it end?" she finally said, her voice barely there. "Your father. The debt. He went to prison. He's still there." I said it flatly. I'd had 3 years to get used to it. And the liability, it took 2 years, but they cleared me. My name came off all of it. I owed nothing in the end. I'd untangled myself from something I was never really tangled in except by his lies. I laughed, and there was no humor in it at all. So the thing I destroyed us to protect you from, I didn't even end up owing it. I blew up the best thing in my life to save you from a debt that turned out not to be mine. I did the noble self-sacrificing thing, and I was wrong, Claire. I was wrong about the debt, and I was wrong to make the choice for you. And by the time I knew I was wrong. 2 years had passed, and you'd moved on, and I thought the kindest thing left was to stay gone. To not turn up and wreck your new life the way I'd wrecked the old one. So I stayed away. And I heard you were happy. And I told myself that was enough. And here's the thing I understood. Saying it out loud on those steps, the thing 3 years of gray certainty had hidden from me. I'd done it all wrong. Not just the debt. The whole shape of it. I'd loved Claire so much that I'd decided her life for her, decided she couldn't handle the truth, couldn't be trusted with the choice, was better off protected than consulted, and that isn't love. Or it's a cowardly, arrogant version of it. Real love would have told her the truth and let her choose. I'd stolen the biggest choice of her life and called it a gift. "You should have told me," she said. And now she was angry, properly angry, the tears and the fury all at once. "That's what I can't, Adam. You robbed me. You decided I couldn't handle it. You decided for me. You looked at me and thought, she's too fragile for the truth. I'll make the choice for her. And you took away the one thing that was mine to decide. I would have married you. Do you understand that? I would have married you in the middle of all of it. I would have faced every bit of it with you. And it would have been hard, and it would have been ours. And instead you sent me away thinking I wasn't enough, and let me spend 3 years believing the man I loved didn't want me. You didn't protect me. You made a decision that was mine to make, and you dressed it up as kindness, and it was the cruelest thing anyone has ever done to me." "I know," I said. "I know. You're right. I've known it for a year, and I've never had the courage to come and say it. I stole your choice. I'm so sorry." The clock said 11:15. She had an hour and 15 minutes. And she stood there on the steps, in the last hour of being unmarried, having finally been handed the truth she'd waited 3 years for. And I watched her try to hold the whole thing, the relief that she'd been right, that he had loved her, and the fury that he'd stolen 3 years and a choice, and the fact that in an hour and 15 minutes she was supposed to marry someone else. "Why now?" I said. "Why did you finally?" "Because I'm getting married today," she said. And I couldn't do it carrying a lie. I've spent 3 years being told a story about why you left that I never believed, and I was about to promise my life to a good man while a part of me was still standing in the wreckage of you, wondering. And I decided I would rather blow up my own wedding day than marry Tom without knowing the truth. That's how much it's haunted me, Adam. I would rather stand on these steps in my going to collect the flowers clothes with my dress in the car and confront the man who broke me than walk down that aisle at peace with a lie. She wiped her face, hard. "So, now I know. You loved me. You did a terrible, arrogant, cowardly, loving thing, and you were wrong, and you stole 3 years from us, and it turns out you didn't even have to." Her voice shook. "And I have an hour to decide what to do about it." And that's when it became the hardest thing I've ever had to say, and the truest. And I said it because I'd finally learned 3 years and 1 prison sentence and a lifetime of load-bearing calculations too late that you don't get to decide another person's life for them, no matter how much you love them. "I'm not going to tell you what to do," I said. She looked at me. "I want to," I said, and my voice broke on it. God, Claire, I want to. I want to say marry me before noon. I want to say don't marry him, choose me. I've never stopped loving you. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the 3 years I stole. I want to say all of it. And I'm not going to, because the last time I decided your life for you, I ruined both of ours. And I swore standing here. Right now, I'm swearing that I will never take a choice away from you again. I made myself say the rest. So here's the truth, all of it, the way I should have given it to you 3 years ago. I love you. I never stopped. Leaving you was the worst mistake of my life, and I've regretted it every single day. And Tom is a good man who has never hurt you and never would. And there is a version of the rest of your life with him that is safe and kind and good. And you deserve that. You deserve safe and kind and good after what I did to you. So I'm not going to tell you to choose me. I'm going to tell you the truth, and then I'm going to do the thing I should have done 3 years ago. I'm going to let you choose. Both doors are real. I love you either way. But it's yours to decide, Claire. It was always yours. I'm just sorry it took me 3 years to let it be. The clock ticked over to 10 to 11, and Claire Bennett stood on the steps of the register office, with a wedding dress over her arm and a good man waiting across town, and the man who'd broken her heart standing in front of her finally telling the truth. And she cried, and I let her. And I didn't reach for her, because reaching for her would have been deciding, and I was done deciding. She was quiet for a long time, the longest minutes of my life. You know what the cruelest part is, she finally said. It's that you're doing it right, now, on these steps. An hour before I marry someone else now, you finally do the thing you should have done 3 years ago. You tell me the truth and you let me choose. And it's the most loving thing you've ever done. And it's 3 years too late. And it might have cost us everything. And I can't decide whether to kiss you or never speak to you again. A wet, broken laugh. You have terrible timing, Adam Cole. You have always had terrible timing. I know, I said. I'm sorry. She looked at the clock. She looked at the dress over her arm. She looked at the doors of the register office, where in an hour a good man was going to be waiting for her. And then she looked at me, and something settled in her face. Some decision arriving. I need to make a phone call, she said quietly. And she stepped a little away from me, and she took out her phone and she called Tom. I couldn't hear all of it. I heard enough. I heard her say his name. And I heard her voice go gentle and steady and terribly kind, and I heard her say, I can't. I'm so sorry, Tom. I can't. And you deserve so much more than a woman who isn't sure. And I've known I wasn't sure, and I let it get all the way to today, and that's the worst thing I've ever done to anyone, and I'm so sorry. And I heard a long silence while a good man across town had his heart broken on his wedding day, and I understood that we don't get clean stories, that even the right choice leaves someone standing in the wreckage, and that Tom Harding was a better man than me and was going to be hurt worse than he deserved, and there was nothing anyone could do about it except be honest, which she was, and which I finally, 3 years too late, had learned to be. She hung up, her hand was shaking. She stood there for a moment with her back to me, and I didn't move, because it still wasn't my choice to make. And then she turned around, and her face was wet and wrecked, and something else too, something I hadn't seen on it in 3 years. I didn't do that for you, she said, and her voice was fierce. I want to be clear about that. I did not just break a good man's heart on his wedding day so I could run into your arms. I did it because I finally realized I've been about to marry someone I chose out of fear, because he was safe. Because he'd never do what you did, and that's not a reason to marry someone. And it's not fair to him. And I'd have known it the second I said the words at 12 o'clock. I ended it because it was wrong, not because of you. She took a breath. But I'm also not going to stand here and pretend the truth doesn't change everything. You loved me. You've always loved me. You did a terrible thing for a loving reason, and you were wrong, and you finally had the courage to let me choose. She wiped her face. So here's my choice, Adam, and it's mine. I'm not marrying anyone today. Not him. Not you don't you dare think marry me before noon is still on the table. It is absolutely not. You have 3 years of trust to rebuild, and I am not remotely finished being furious with you. The smallest, wateriest, most impossible smile. But I'm not walking away either. I'm choosing to find out. Slowly, carefully, with you doing an enormous amount of work to earn back what you broke. That's my choice. That's what I decided. Not you. Me, and I understood that I'd been given something I had no right to and would spend the rest of my life trying to deserve. Okay, I said, and my voice barely worked. Okay, slowly, carefully, whatever you need. For as long as it takes. We didn't fall into each other's arms on the steps. I want to be honest about that. Because the version where the truth heals 3 years in a single morning is a lie, and there was too much real in this, and too much of it my fault to cheapen it. She didn't marry me before noon. Noon came and went, that day, and she didn't marry anyone. And a good man named Tom spent the worst afternoon of his life, and I've never stopped being sorry about the collateral cost of my cowardice, that it took a decent man's wedding day to undo it. But we did the work, because we'd both learned exactly what not doing it costs. And the work was real, and it was slow, and it was, for a long time, mostly me proving day after day, month after month, that I would never again decide her life for her, never again mistake control for love, never again dress up a theft as a gift. I had 3 years of stolen trust to earn back, and I earned it the only way you can, which is slowly and without expecting to be forgiven. She stayed furious for a good while, and she was right to, and I never once told her she shouldn't be. She'd let me back into her life, but on her terms, at her pace, with her choosing every single step, because that was the whole lesson, the thing my father's fraud and my own cowardice had taken 3 years to teach me, that loving someone means telling them the truth and trusting them to choose, even when you're terrified of what they'll choose. My father is still in prison. I visit, sometimes. It's complicated, the way it always is with the people who damage us and are still somehow ours, and Claire comes with me now, occasionally, which is a kind of grace I'll never fully understand. The woman whose life I nearly ruined to protect from him, sitting across a prison table from the man I ruined it over, because she decided, on her own, that she wanted to. Her choice. Everything her choice now. I finally learned. We married 2 years after that morning on the steps. Not at the register office. She said she never wanted to see those steps again as long as she lived, and I understood, but in a garden, small, with my mother crying in the front row, and Claire's family cautiously, slowly warming back to the man who'd broken their girl's heart and spent 2 years proving he'd never do it again. She wore white, and this time nobody was late, and nobody ran, and there was no clock counting down, and no other wedding waiting, and no lie between us, just 2 people who'd lost 3 years to my cowardice and decided, both of us, eyes open, to spend the rest of them telling each other the truth. She caught my arm on the steps of the register office and said, "Marry me before noon." And I thought she'd lost her mind, and then I saw the dress and the clock and understood she was marrying someone else at 12 and giving me until then to be honest. It turned out the bravest thing I ever did wasn't the sacrifice I made 3 years before. That was just a coward, deciding another person's life for her and calling it love. The bravest thing I ever did was stand on those steps and tell her the truth and then let her choose, with everything in me screaming to choose for her, and not. She didn't marry me before noon. She did something far better. 3 years and a great deal of hard work later, she chose me. Freely, with the truth in front of her and no clock forcing her hand, which is the only way I ever should have let her choose me in the first place.